When it comes to older video games, you don't ask for much. You want them to look good and you want it to be simple. I've always felt a small fruit arrangement goes a long way. But if we're talking picture quality, most of us are still looking for ease and effectiveness without judgmental folks sending you to you-know-where for your setup. At the same time, you also don't want to be sent you-know-where, the never-ending research that is the retro gaming video quality rabbit hole. People who go in there, well, they never come back the same now, do they? If they ever come back at all. Right away, the best suggestion I can give you for an easy, authentic, good-looking, low-cost solution is to grab a CRT TV, then get one of these 4 cables for your game console and plug it in. With the cables further to the right, typically considered better. You can even get component cables instead of the RGB cables to make them easier for us Americans to use. And for a lot of people, yes, it can be that simple, but if you want to look into things even further, then depending on your situation, how perfect you want the picture to be, what equipment you have, what equipment you're willing to have, and what you can afford, well, let's just say there's a number of variables that can come into play. Enter the retro gaming video quality rabbit hole. I'm going in so you don't have to. Here I go. Actually, probably gonna need a snack. So first you find out about RGB SCART cables that are supposed to offer really good video quality. What the heck is SCART? You find out it was a video connection that was never standardized in the United States. Then you find out composite is actually considered to be garbage by a lot of people. You don't want to play with garbage, do ya? Then you find out that to use SCART, you probably need a converter. Then you find out that to use the converter, you need a TV that can accept component video, not to be confused with composite, which sounds similar. Then you find out most TVs don't have component. Then you find out not everyone selling old TVs is willing to send you a picture of the inputs on the back of their TV. Then you find out you burned your meatloaf in the oven while you were distracted with your research. Then you find out that certain consoles have revisions that vary in video quality, if only slightly, but enough to trigger your compulsion to have the best at this point. So then you find out you need to check different motherboards that might need special screwdrivers to open up the consoles. Then you find out the Super Nintendo needs soldering done to lower the brightness on the units with better video quality. That's right, soldering. You know, that thing that scares people who don't know how to do it, but you read that even an idiot can do it, and you're not an idiot. I'm an idiot, and I did it. And then you find out, where you going? I've still got more cables to show you. Because then you find out there's also what's called JP21 cables that have different pinouts than SCART but look exactly the same. Use the wrong one and you might damage your equipment. And then you find out that SCART cables have different types of sync. What's sync? Something you don't understand. But you find out different sync sometimes only works on certain consoles unless you modify them. Speaking of which, not all consoles support SCART cables without modification to begin with. Do not go in there. Woo! What's really ironic about all of it is that some, not all, but some people will just tell you that composite video, aka good old yella, is what you actually want to be using anyways, due to what's referred to as dithering, where developers would use the blurring effects of composite video to blend certain colors together and intentionally design their games around how they'd look with composite video in mind. And of course, good old composite video is available by default for just about every older console from the NES on up, harkening back to the days of how you probably played these games as a kid. Speaking of which, if plugging whatever cable you had into whatever TV you had worked as a kid, a childhood full of joy can vouch for that, then why can't you just plug whatever cable you have into whatever TV you have now? And the answer is, well, you can, but yeah. The reason is that the TV you have now wasn't made with low-resolution video games from the 80s and 90s in mind. It was made with stuff like Moana and binge-watching Cake Wars in mind. The resolutions of older consoles simply don't match those of newer TVs, and so your TV does unfavorable things processing the image if you're not using an upscaling device. I can't tell you how many times I've seen somebody excited to share a picture in a forum or fan group online of something they're playing, only to get blasted in the comments for doing it wrong in one way or another. I'm not in the business of telling people they're having fun the wrong way, and I'm not sure why anybody would be, but I am in the business of helping anyone who's asking how to improve their video quality, or, maybe doesn't know any better and appreciates the advice when brought up to them in a friendly way. Nope, let's dial it back. There we go. If we go back to these 4 cables here and plugging one of them into a CRT TV, this really is the easiest I can make it for all of you. Quality improves as you move from left to right, unless, of course, you prefer the dithering of composite. The SCART connection is the only one you'll need a converter for to convert it to component, but like I said before, you can also just purchase no-fuss component cables if you want. Now, if you'd like to take a little journey with me through the 4 of them, here we go. Of course, nothing matches looking at the TV in real life, but this should give you an idea. RF is generally considered the connection you don't want to use, but on a decent CRT TV, I don't think it looks as bad as its reputation would have you believe. Up from there, we have composite video, the champion of dithering fans alike. Very easy to come by, find cables for, and use. I remember the first day I hooked up composite cables as a kid. Boy, did I feel like Mr. Big Boy Electronics that day. After that, we have S-video, and this is where the biggest jump in quality comes from, in my opinion. The picture becomes a lot more clear, and it's especially evident with text on screen. From there you have RGB SCART, which many people in the US will convert to component. It's slightly more clear than S-video, but the biggest difference to me is in the way it handles colors. Highly coveted by many and often considered the best you can do on a CRT TV. There is such a thing as HD CRT TVs, but not everyone recommends these for a number of reasons, but mainly because the resolutions of HDMI don't match the native resolutions of most older consoles anyways. And speaking of HD TVs, a lot of people do indeed use more modern HD TVs to play their retro games on. I'll leave the debate between HD TVs and CRT TVs for a different video, namely one I've already made, but if you do choose to play on a HD TV, everything from the rabbit hole still applies, but on top of that, it's recommended that you, first of all, don't stretch the image into widescreen, but get an upscaler to properly redraw the image of these older games to look right on a higher resolution display. And RetroTink would absolutely be my recommendation. The more expensive ones, as you'd expect, are considered to do a better job, but part of the extras you're paying for are just more robust options to try to replicate the look of a CRT TV. The RetroTink 4K that's out of stock as of this video is listed for $750. For that much, maybe finding space for a CRT TV isn't as hard as you thought, is it? Here we go, just saved $750. Also, some people have asked me about getting games to look their best on emulators, but there are tons of different emulators, each with their own different settings. If you want my personal suggestion, it would be to just tweak the CRT or scanline filter to adjust it to your preference, and then not mess with anything else. Most of it should be more or less what you want by default. Alright, but now let's move on to some more simple tips, the type of stuff that your everyday drink soda and fart on the couch individual can do. My first tip might seem obvious, but I've seen enough dusty, dirty dog TVs to be convinced it's not obvious enough. wipe the dust off your TV. It's simple, it's easy, it may not make a huge difference, but it's worth doing. Next is to adjust the settings on your TV. Again, not rocket science, but people often forget about this. You can tweak the settings to your personal preference, but I've generally found that it's a good idea to not have most of the settings jacked up too high, and especially the brightness. If you want to get back into rabbit hole territory, sorry, there's just no avoiding it with this kind of topic. You can still drink soda and fart on the couch if you want though, but what you can do is access a TV's secret service menu settings. You'll have to look up what the secret input combination on your remote is to access these settings on your particular TV though. And talk about scaring people away, you'll quickly see why they hide these settings. Definitely a guess and check type of scenario where you should remember what each setting started at so you can put it back when you're done. Or most TVs will restore their defaults if you just unplug the TV's power cord without doing the special remote combination to save the settings first. In some cases, this is used to adjust the overscan/underscan, where part of the picture is either missing or doesn't fill the screen. In other cases, this is used to adjust a TV's geometry settings, where, because of the way CRT TVs work, the picture isn't always completely straight, even, and level. Keep in mind, it can be nearly impossible to get it perfect due to the way the technology of CRT TVs works. Mine's definitely not perfect, but it doesn't bother me. Nobody ever complains about it, and even if they did, I wouldn't care. So I'm cool with it. Okay, the next tip I want to give is one that I recommend specifically for some of the early 3D games. You know, PlayStation 1, N64, Sega Saturn. Some people just find these games to look ugly and primitive no matter what sort of TV or cable connections you're using. So a suggestion I have is to play them on a smaller TV, essentially making the flaws less visible. I'm telling you, a smaller screen just has a way of cleaning up the image on things. And hey, if you want to take it a step further in the spirit of making the image less visible, just close your eyes and imagine what Nintendo 64 games could look like. A smaller screen does work though, assuming you don't mind a smaller screen. Think about it. What often exposes the look of an image as bad is when it's blown up. Something low resolution having to fill up all that space of a big screen. So, by putting the image on a smaller display, it has the effect of looking higher resolution in a way, since there's less space for the image to fill up. And while I'm in a pitch dark room, I'll go ahead and make the argument that helps the picture look better as well. You may need to adjust your TV's brightness and contrast settings accordingly, but I find it looks better and prevents any sort of light sources from affecting the image. You can buy blackout curtains for really cheap, if cheap is what you're looking for, which I'll just assume it is. The close your eyes and imagine method works good for making things darker too. But there you have it. That's my advice for making your games look better. If parts of the video felt overwhelming, it really does all come back to this. Left to right, worst to best, and just choose the cable that your console and CRT TV both support. And a quick Google search will tell you which connections each console supports without modding. Plug it in and you're good to go. But with that, I'm curious, as always, to hear what all of you have to say. Perhaps any little tips or tricks you may have yourself. So leave a comment down below to share your thoughts, and I will see ya in the next video.
He's the retro bird, yeah, and he's talking about video games. He's the retro bird, oh yes, and he hopes that you liked what he had to say.